Welcome. Oh, I am so excited to share this topic with you. I have been diving into more training, which I love. And it's so interesting how you can show up for one thing and it connects the dots for something you may not have expected or anticipated you would receive from the training. So, for those of you that know me, I have been on a journey of recovering from trauma as a result of a motor vehicle accident and some mental health related issues that I have been in recovery from for a little while as well. And it was so interesting. In our class today, we were talking about how, the stress response is physiological and it's not something that we can override mentally. And I had like an example provided from one of the participants who kept going into this story loop and explaining her trauma story. And she was going way back to like when she was in her mother's womb, and she was quite emotional. And I had this realization, and she's brilliant. She's explained that she studied medicine and she's taking all of these trainings, and she also has had a brain injury and depression, anxiety. So I could totally relate to her and what she was saying. But as I was in the forest after class today, I just kept hearing, you can't intellectualize your way through trauma recovery. And I know I made a video that was talking about learning as a tool to heal from trauma. And I want to clarify, because I don't mean learning about trauma recovery to heal from trauma. What I meant was learning something new helps you heal by bringing you into a different part of your brain. And it's interesting because we were talking about the science of it, stress, today, and the reminder that when we experience stress, what happens in our nervous system, and that the hypothalamus gets larger and these connections of the nervous system sort of like shrink. And it brings us into this constant replay of fight or flight. And I know going through my experience with trauma, I had to keep telling the story because like insurance was involved, and having to explain yourself every time. I've had 4 different social workers for therapy, like having to start again and retell your story over and over and over again actually reactivates it in your body and the physiological symptoms that go along with that. And so I'm popping on here to talk about this because in a lot of ways, I sense that people underestimate the power of practices like yoga for healing trauma or for even dealing with general stress. And I know I'm not a healthcare provider. I am not a healthcare practitioner. I am not a medical doctor. And I'm not even really a technical person. And I have no science background or training. My background is in business administration, but I have been teaching yoga for several years. And more important, I have had my own experience of recovery through applying the skills I learned in the training, not from learning them, not from trying to think my way out of stress or trauma, but from practicing the skills regularly. And I remember people saying like, oh, just go back to your breath, just take a deep breath. And how many of us in the heat of it, in the moment, never think of that? And why do you think it is that we don't think of the solution when we need it the most? Well, it's because we're distracted by the stress. And in some cases, that becomes our baseline. Our nervous system gets used to feeling that level of stress, and that becomes our new version of how our body operates. That's like the baseline of the nervous system's normal. And what's interesting is I remember doing my yoga therapeutics training, and I was always a very like go, go, go kind of a person. And if things interrupted me, that would like really set me off because I always had so much to do. I was like, I don't have time to wait. Or like traffic jam would come up and I'm trying to get to the airport and I would get stressed. Well, I remember this one specific story back in 2014, and my boyfriend at the time was driving me to the airport in Montreal, and he was getting so stressed because the traffic was like literally a parking lot, and he had to have me at the airport in like 15 minutes, and we were like too far from the airport for me to get there on time. And he's huffing and he's puffing and he's making all of these sounds under his breath. And he just looks at me and he's like, how are you so calm? And this is my previous personality before the brain injury, but I said to him, huffing and puffing about it is not going to get me to the airport any faster. And he looked at me like, wow. I said, yeah, this training's really helping me. Because I probably like a week before, if that same thing happened, I would have been more upset than him. And he knew that, which is why he was like, why are you not upset? But we had been practicing. Part of our homework for that month was to notice our breath all the time. And because that became a regular practice for me of noticing my breath when I'm not stressed, noticing my breath, you know, when I'm doing things I enjoy, noticing my breath all the time, as soon as my breath changed, I noticed it and was like, oh, slow down your breath and you will interrupt the stress response. Because really, there's no threat right now. If you miss the plane, there will be another one. Like, it's inconvenient, but it's not a life and death situation. And our stress response, evolutionarily speaking, is looking for those threats to our actual survival. Its job was to keep us alive, which is great because we're all here right now. Yeah, so it did its job. But our job today is learning how to remember that we are not in life or death situations most of the time. And I mean, depending on your job and like things that you get involved in, your story might be different. But every time I was retelling my story about the car accident and like all of the loss that happened afterwards and how it impacted my life, I was literally reframing that groove. And we talked about in the training today, like when we have early childhood trauma or like stories about our parents, like we saw an example today in the training. One of the people was sharing about how their brother shared something like that openly with a group of people that they didn't even know. And she was like, why would you bring that up? And it's interesting because it sort of becomes like a sense of identity for people when they live the story and they keep telling the story and telling the story and telling the story. It literally becomes part of who you are. And what I love is that we can remember that we are not our story, and we have a chance in every moment to rewrite it, to create a new story. And the way that I have found that is the easiest way for us to access that is through clearing all of the old stories from the body, because the physiology of it, it stays in our physical body unless we move the energy out. Unless it has a channel of somewhere to go, this is why we end up with tension. And I can't tell you like how many people have said to me, "Oh, you're a yoga teacher. I'm not flexible. I can't do yoga." It's like the most common thing I hear. And what I want to say to them is different than what I'll say right now. But I often say, "Oh, the style of yoga that I teach is less about flexibility and more about building vitality through strengthening the navel and clearing energy from the physical body." We don't hang out in poses or postures. We use our breath and we use quick, repetitive movements to clear energy channels. And sometimes that's our voice. And sometimes it's a combination of things that we do. And people sort of look at me, but there are a lot of different styles of yoga, not just yoga that, you know, you're moving through a sequence of poses. That's probably the most popular in North America. But if you go back to the roots of yoga, that's sort of like 1/8 of what yoga actually has to offer you. There's so many more layers to yoga. And so I show up on my mat every day. I have various practices. Some of them I'm doing for 1,000 days. Some of them I'm doing for 90 days. You know, it varies. But there's one that I do that is chanting for 22 minutes. There's one that I do that is very physical. It's like 108 frogs, which is a specific movement that I do and repeat it 108 times every morning. There's one that I do that is a flow of 4 poses, and I do that for 11 minutes every day. And each one of them invites me to be in my physical body, to notice my breath, and to get out of my mind, to step away from the stories of the thoughts that our mind is constantly telling us. And we talk about in other trainings like the mind and meditation course about our mental intrigues. And sometimes our mind is really good at hijacking us because the thoughts are interesting. And so we go down the rabbit hole with them. But the answer, the key to staying present, is to return to the body. And when we have a clear channel of that, when we practice it, it doesn't have to be every day, but if we practice it regularly, it becomes like everything else, a pattern. Yeah. So rapid breathing is going to cause your body stress over time. And then if that becomes your normal, if that's what your nervous system is like, "Oh, this is just how we breathe," are you getting enough oxygen for your body, or are you feeling tired all the time? Some of us, when we're stressed, like me, will just like hold our breath and the body gets tense. And then you're like, "Oh yeah, breathe." You're not breathing. we all have stress patterns. And our breath is the first thing that lets us know what's happening in the nervous system. And if you desire to deepen your awareness of your connection with your body, I will love to hear from you. We have so many different ways to explore that together. I do offer private classes or private sessions where we can specifically hone in on what it is that you desire to pay attention to or shift in your life. I offer regular Kundalini yoga classes. I have a few new things percolating that I haven't released yet. But if you email me, I'll add you to the mailing list and you'll be one of the first ones to know when the new classes are available. And I have this new exciting series that starts on July 11th. And I'm offering it at a super low price just to encourage people to show up for themselves. Because for me, it's less about the money and more about sharing this information that would have really helped me if I had it when I was starting out my journey of recovery. So there's 3 different streams of classes. The first one starts July 11th, July 18th, and July 25th. They're all Mondays, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And it's all offered virtually. The classes are live and you get a recording. So you can watch them as much as you want to after the fact. And if this is something that appeals to you, the first stream is about spirituality and connecting with ourselves through spirituality. And the next series is on healing, and then the third one is on communication. So as I said, I'll drop my email below, and if you would like more information, I would love to hear from you. I'll also include my Instagram, and if you want to follow me there or on Facebook, it's Wellness Your Way 8, but I'll include the link below for you. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for watching this video. And if you want to join our community, I would love to have you subscribe to this channel. And if this is content that you enjoy and you may benefit from, or someone else you know might benefit from, I would love if you will like the video and share it. So much love, and I hope you come back to check out another video here.